In the 10th century, high on the peaks of the Persian mountains, a man appeared whose name would one day become a symbol of fear and mystery. His name was Hazan ibn Sabah. He founded a sect that did not rely on swords or vast armies to inspire terror, but on something far more subtle, the shadow of faith itself. In the chronicles, they were called the Assassins, an order that held sultans and crusaders in constant tension, instilling fear even in the most powerful rulers of their age. Welcome, my dear friends. You are on the official ASMR Dreams channel, where dreams slowly turn into knowledge, and that familiar voice guides you gently through the night. Tonight, we will lift the veil from the world of the Assassins. We will learn how this brotherhood was born, why its followers lived apart from the world, almost like monks, and how they transformed themselves into a symbol of fear and enigma. We will examine the myths of heavenly gardens and secret rituals, compare them with real historical chronicles, and try to understand who these people truly were: fanatics, warriors, or the creators of one of the very first secret societies in history. Thank you for the warmth you leave in the comments. You help our channel grow and breathe. If our style resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss future journeys into the night. Now, make yourself comfortable. Let your body relax. Close your eyes. Let the night become a guide into a world where reality and mystery are inseparable. We begin the story of the Assassins. To understand where the Assassins came from, we must travel back to the first centuries after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. Islam at that time was a young religion, burning, alive, full of movement, and at the same time torn apart by contradictions. There was no rigid dogma yet. Questions of power and faith were so closely intertwined that even a small mistake could lead to bloodshed. The Prophet Muhammad left behind the Quran and the example of his own life, but he did not name a clear successor. For many Muslims, this became a painful trial. Who should now lead the community? Who could be considered the true heir of the Prophet? The first caliphs came to power as leaders chosen by the community itself. At first, this seemed reasonable. Power was given to respected, experienced men who were willing to carry responsibility. But very quickly, it became clear that such a system produced not only agreement, but endless disputes. Every clan, every influential family had its own candidate. And behind names and faces stood ambitions, wealth, and entire armies of supporters. Thus, the first and most important split was born. One group of Muslims, those who would later be called Sunnis, believed that the community should be led by a worthy man chosen by the people. Another group, the future Shiites, insisted power belongs only to the direct descendants of the Prophet, for within them lies his spiritual legacy. This crack quickly turned into a chasm. Blood was soon spilled. Of the first 4 caliphs, 3 were murdered, and they were not killed by foreign enemies, but by fellow Muslims, disappointed, betrayed, offended, or fanatically loyal to another vision of faith. Politics and religion became inseparable. Every decision sparked not debate, but conspiracy. The situation became especially tense after the death of Ali, the Prophet's son-in-law, whom many considered the only legitimate leader. His death became a point of no return. Those who recognized the descendants of Ali became the core of the Shiite movement. Those who rejected their claims remained in the Sunni camp. But even among the Shiites, peace was short-lived. Faith in the true Imam, the heir of Ali, seemed simple at first, yet in reality, it caused new disputes. Each Imam had several sons, and there were always those who claimed that their candidate was the true successor. Thus, new branches of Shiite tradition emerged. One of the most mysterious among them were the Ismailis. They believed that after the death of the 6th Imam, Far al-Sadiq, power should have passed to his eldest son, Ismail. But Ismail died before his father. Or perhaps he did not. Some claimed his death was staged, that he was hidden away to protect him from enemies. Thus was born the belief in the hidden Imam, who would live in secrecy and reveal himself only at the end of time. This idea changed everything. If the Imam is hidden, his will must be transmitted by trusted intermediaries. If he is unreachable, his followers must obey those who speak in his name and preserve secrecy. Thus, within Ismailism, a quiet network of missionaries emerged, unnoticed people living among strangers, spreading teaching softly, carefully. Unlike the Sunnis, who relied on armies and open warfare, the Ismailis relied on words and persuasion. Their faith spread not by the sword, but by whispers. They were like roots growing into cracks in stone, invisible, patient, persistent. Over time, the Ismailis even created their own state, the Fatimid Caliphate in North Africa and Egypt. There they built the brilliant city of Cairo, and their rulers claimed descent from Ali himself. But once again, division followed. In the 11th century, another split divided the Ismailis into two branches, the Mustailis and the Nizaris. It was the Nizaris, persecuted, hunted, driven into the mountains, who would later be known to the world as the Assassins. The world in which they emerged was a world of constant turmoil. Empires rose and fell. Cities changed hands. Rulers died from daggers and poison. No one felt truly safe. It was in this atmosphere that an order appeared which made fear its primary weapon. And when a light was lit in the mountain fortress of Alamut, a story began that would haunt the imagination of East and West for centuries to come. The vizier was riding surrounded by his retinue when a man dressed as a wandering dervish approached him. At first, he seemed to be begging for alms, his posture humble, his voice quiet. But in the next heartbeat, the beggar's hand flashed from beneath his robe. A dagger appeared and struck the vizier straight in the chest. Nizam fell lifeless to the ground. The assassin was seized immediately. He knew he would die, yet his face remained calm, almost serene. In that moment, a new force was born, fanatical, willing to die, and therefore almost invulnerable. This act shook the entire Islamic world. Hazen's enemies realized that from now on they were facing not an army, but something far more terrifying. An army can be met in the open field. Walls can be strengthened. Militias can be raised. But how do you defend yourself against a man who pretends to be a beggar, a student, a servant, and then suddenly becomes an executioner? Rumors spread instantly. People whispered that the assassins could enter anywhere, that they did not fear death, that they could not be stopped. These stories themselves became weapons. When Hazen's enemies gathered to act against him, they thought not only about troops and fortresses, but about the possibility that a dagger might appear beside their bed at night. After the death of Nizam al-Mulk, the killings continued. Military commanders, emirs, judges, theologians, all those who openly opposed the Ismailis or threatened Alamut became targets. The strike was always precise and always public. The assassins never used poison. They did not kill in secret. Their purpose was that everyone would see. Even surrounded by guards, even in a temple or a palace, no one was truly protected. This strategy worked. Cities began to fear. Many chose not to oppose the assassins at all, just to avoid finding their name on the list. Sometimes, a mere rumor that the order was displeased was enough for a man to change his behavior. In politics, this was called deterrence. But the assassins turned it into an art. In Alamut, the names of fallen enemies were recorded and preserved. It was considered an honor if a Fida carried out a mission and died. His name was immortalized, and he became an example for others. This gave the cause an aura of holiness. One of the first volunteers, a young man named Bin Tarar, became a symbol of loyalty. He said, "I am ready," went on his mission, and never returned. There were many such stories. People walked toward death willingly, and this made a powerful impression. An ordinary warrior wants to survive, but a Fidai considered death the crown of his mission. Enemies searched for explanations. Some claimed the assassins were enchanted, that they were given potions and intoxicants. Others said they were shown heavenly gardens and promised eternal bliss. Thus were born the myths of hashish, of dazzling visions, of maidens waiting beyond the mountains. These stories frightened and fascinated, but the truth was likely simpler: faith, fanaticism, and iron discipline. Gradually, a network of assassinations spread across Persia. In major cities, officials and theologians began to die one after another. This weakened the Seljuks, whose power was already unstable due to internal conflicts. The assassins became a shadow falling over every palace. They were failures. Some killers were caught, executed, crucified in public squares. But this did not reduce fear. On the contrary, condemned Fides died calmly, without begging for mercy. And the crowd that came to witness the execution left shaken. They saw that fear of death held no power over these men. Thus began an era of terror that would last for decades. During Hezen's rule, nearly 50 high-ranking individuals were killed. To some, this number may seem small, but each death mattered. Each one strengthened the reputation of the order. Gradually, enemies stopped seeing the assassins as a minor sect. They had become a force that could not be ignored. The Seljuk army still outnumbered them, but no one could say they were safe. Armies could destroy walls, but the fear of the assassins destroyed certainty. It was in these first strikes that the Order's legend was born. They showed that a dagger in the hand of the faithful could be more terrifying than 100 swords. They proved that a small sect could hold an entire empire in tension. And when the sun rose over the mountains of Persia, its light fell upon Alamet, the place where one man created a state in which death became a weapon and fear became policy. The assassins were never a numerous people. They could not be compared to the Seljuks, who commanded vast nomadic armies, or to the Crusaders, who built kingdoms along the Mediterranean shores. Their strength lay elsewhere, in a network, a web slowly spreading across Persia and Syria, almost invisible. At its center stood Awalat, a rock impossible to climb without a guide. Around it, dozens of other castles held by supporters of the Order. Each fortress was an island. Together, they formed a country without borders. Communication between these islands was held together by faith and discipline. The assassins had no great cities, no vast trade routes, but they had preachers and secret agents. They moved from village to village, persuading people of the truth of Ismailism, finding supporters even among enemies. At times, it seemed the assassins could be anywhere. Rumors traveled faster than their people. If someone spoke badly of the Ismailis in a city, it could happen that weeks later he was found dead, and no one knew who struck the blow. A neighbor, a beggar, or a passing traveler. Fear did its work. People stopped openly criticizing the assassins. Silence became safer. Thus, the Order transformed into a force far more dangerous than a simple army. An army needs weapons, supplies, logistics. Fear needs only a few determined men and carefully released rumors. The assassins were especially influential where authority was weak. The Seljuk Empire was already cracking. After the death of Sultan Malik Shah, a struggle for the throne began and chaos spread. In this atmosphere, the assassins felt free. They seized small fortresses, converted garrisons to their faith, sometimes taking castles through deception. In some places, the population supported them. In others, they ruled by force. Year after year, their network grew. In Persia, they occupied dozens of mountain castles. In Syria, they settled in Masyaf, which would become the Order's second center. These fortresses were small, but nearly impregnable. Enemies could besiege them for months, but the mountains protected them better than any walls. Inside, life was strict. People worked, grew grain, practiced crafts. Women labored alongside men. There was no luxury, no wine, no slave trade. Everything served survival and faith. But the main weapon remained fear. The killings continued. Not many dozens over decades, but each felt like an earthquake. Viziers died. Emirs died. Theologians died. Enemies knew. If they opposed the order, their name might appear on the list. Rumors multiplied. They said the assassins could kill anyone, even a sultan. They said a fidei could hide for years, earning trust, pretending to be a beggar or servant, and then strike. They said no guard could save you. Even if exaggerated, the effect was enormous. People began to see assassins even where there were none. Sometimes, a rumor of an attempt was more terrifying than the attempt itself. Gradually, the web of fear spread beyond Persia, into Syria, Iraq, and even Egypt. Enemies called them Hashishin, implying they were drug-addled madmen. But the assassins called themselves Fidai, those who sacrificed themselves. And this word best explained their world. They did not seek wealth. They did not hoard gold. Their goal was to preserve faith and the strength of the order. And for that, they were ready to sacrifice their lives, their futures, their names. Slowly, the order became part of political reality. Sultans, emirs, even crusaders understood. If assassinations could be ordered, it was better to negotiate than to resist. Sometimes the order accepted such requests. Sometimes it acted on its own will. But everyone knew ignoring them was impossible. Thus, from a small fortress on a cliff, Hazan ibn Sabah created a country without borders. A country that existed not on maps, but in the minds of people. A country where power rested not on armies, but on fear. And that country proved surprisingly durable. While empires collapsed and dynasties changed, the assassins endured. They were a shadow, always nearby. Impossible to seize. Impossible to destroy in a single blow. And so even the most powerful rulers preferred negotiation over war. This was the strength of the order. They made fear their territory, and faith their weapon. To remove suspicion, the assassins allegedly sent a letter denying his involvement. Whether that letter was genuine or a forgery is not so important. What matters is that even European monarchs felt compelled to justify themselves before the old man of the mountain. Saladin, the greatest military commander of the Muslim world, also felt the power of the order. He was an enemy of the Ismailis, and at one point the assassins attempted to kill him. According to legend, one morning Saladin awoke to find a dagger lying beside his pillow with a note. "Next time it will be in your heart." This story was most likely invented, but the fact remains. Saladin chose to negotiate with the assassins and leave them in peace. Thus, step by step, the order became a force that all sides reckoned with. Crusaders, Muslim sultans, viziers, everyone understood that open hostility toward the assassins could end with a dagger in the chest. In Europe, stories about them spread like a snowball. Knights returning home told tales of a sect of killers, and with every retelling, the stories grew darker. People believed the assassins could reach even Europe itself, that their network covered the entire world. Of course, this was an exaggeration. The assassins never operated beyond the Middle East. But myth proved stronger than fact, and for the assassins, this was advantageous. Their fame grew faster than their real achievements. They became a symbol of terror, and that symbol worked better than any army. When the name of the order was spoken in the West, it no longer meant Nizaris or Ismailis. It meant invisible killers. It was during the era of the Crusades that the legend of the assassins fully took shape. They were allies and enemies, a hidden threat and a political instrument. Both Muslims and Christians feared them. In the mountains, the fires of Alamet and Masyaf still burned. Within their fortresses lived people who believed in the hidden imam and were ready to die for his cause. But to the rest of the world, they were no longer merely a religious sect. They had become a myth, one that crossed the borders of the East and stepped into Europe. As long as the name of the old man of the mountain sounded menacing, the order held firm, like a rock in the fog, solid in outline, impenetrable, disciplined within. But time, like water, slowly erodes even the hardest stone. After the death of Hazan ibn Sabah, changes began, changes no human system can escape. Generations. At first, everything still held together through harsh discipline. The successors in Alamat preserved the strict order, strengthened the walls, replenished supplies, and maintained the network of fortresses and agents. But gradually the mood changed. A sect born in conflict and living with the mindset of a besieged fortress matured, acquired households, libraries, workshops, and habits of peaceful life. Within the same courtyard, two forces now coexisted: ascetic discipline and the pull of calm. In the second half of the 12th century, one of the rulers of Alamat undertook a spiritual revolution. He proclaimed a resurrection, not the end of the world in a literal sense, but a spiritual event after which external law was no longer binding, because truth had been revealed inwardly. This challenged the entire Muslim world. How could one live beside those who claimed the path of hidden truth mattered more than outward rules? The reform shook the order. For some, it brought long-awaited clarity. For others, it destroyed familiar ground. Soon the ruler was killed by his own dissatisfied followers, but what he had begun did not disappear entirely. The community had tasted another form of religious life. The following years brought a reverse movement. Another ruler of Alamat tried to speak a more familiar language to the surrounding world. He restored public rituals, emphasized loyalty to the Sunni environment, built mosques, and entered alliances. This was not a bid for love, but for time. If we resemble others, we are harder to single out as a target. For a while, the strategy worked. In Persia and Syria, the network of the order continued to breathe. In some places, the assassins became just another mountain principality. Elsewhere, negotiators and intermediaries. Elsewhere still, the familiar shadow with a dagger. The Syrian branch, led by the charismatic Rashid ad-Din Sinan, grew stronger behind the fortress walls of Masyaf. Here, in the rocky ribs of the coastal mountains, the assassins acted more boldly than their Persian brethren. They negotiated with the Templars, bargained with the princes of Tripoli, disrupted plans with a single night strike, and by morning sent embassies with courteous words. Their world was less closed and more diplomatic. Amid sailors of the Levant, knights, Bedouins, and merchants, Masyaf became a knot where rumors turned into agreements. Yet even here, beneath the protection of legend, lived the same old discipline. Quiet courtyards, hidden stairways, boys being trained, readiness to die at the first sign. Saladin, whose power gradually unified the Muslim East, first went to war with the assassins, then to negotiations. It benefited both sides not to push matters too far. Storming a mountain fortress was costly and humiliating. The threat of a nighttime dagger was too high a price for pride. Several assassination attempts against Saladin failed. In response, sieges gave way to peace. Thus, the order fit itself into the complex political score of Syria. For a time, balance seemed to be found. The dagger left its sheath less often. Words more often preceded action. But far to the east, a cloud was rising, one that did not consider agreements a meaningful argument. The Mongols advanced like a steppe wildfire. They did not debate inheritance rights, did not build theological arguments, did not fear the spirit of fortresses. Their logic was simpler. Land that does not bow will be trampled by hooves. A city that does not open, its gates will turn to ash. The first news of the great horde's approach stirred a new, unfamiliar feeling in the mountains. Not fear, but cold clarity. The assassins knew how to weaken empires, undermine leaders, spread doubt. But a hurricane without a single leader was a difficult target for a dagger. An attempt to play by old rules, sending assassins to the Khan, only intensified the nomad's fury. Perhaps this too was legend or propaganda, but the outcome was the same. The Mongol machine moved forward, indifferent to persuasion. The last rulers of Alamut wavered between strategies. One sought alliances with neighboring courts. Another tried to appease the Khans with embassies and gifts. A third hoped to wait it out in the mountains, as had worked before. But this time, the enemy came not like a neighboring sultan, whose army could be endured, but like a force of nature, slow, heavy, inevitable. Sieges followed capitulations. Capitulations followed massacres. In 1256, the armies of Huladu reached Alamut. The network of supporting fortresses fell one after another, some after brief sieges, some through negotiation, some through betrayal. In Alamut itself, there was still confidence that the mountains would protect them, as they had before. But siege engines dragged onto the slopes proved otherwise. The age of stone refuges was over. The fortress fell. It was said the library was burned. In the flames vanished theological works, treatises on astronomy and medicine, the records of missionaries. Perhaps some books were carried away, some hidden, some truly turned to ash. For the people of the order, this was more than material loss. Memory itself burned, the memory of a workshop where words were turned into conviction and power. Other castles fell as well. In the mountains, stubborn garrisons clenched their teeth and held out for years. But the strategic meaning of these small lights faded. A network built on connections lost its nodes. The paths of secret messengers became deadly gorges with no exit. The Syrian fortresses lasted longer. Masyaf burned brighter in legend than in reality. But here, too, a new order arrived. Knights and sultans now thought not of the old man of the mountain, but as shifting trade routes, new taxes, new borders. The assassins maintained cautious agreements, occasionally reminded the world of themselves, but their shadow no longer covered half the sky as before. Some of the Fignas went underground and lived almost like mountain peasants, with secret names, a few trusted neighbors, and quiet loyalty to old vows. Others emigrated to distant cities and dissolved into crafts, trade, teaching. Some found a new center not fortress walls, but communities where texts and charity mattered more than daggers and ladders. Thus, the religious core of Ismailism outlived the military shell of the order, like a seed surviving a fire. Occasionally, history summoned the shadows against stories of attempts to retake Alamut, of banners briefly raised and quickly torn down. But these were no longer chapters of the main book, only footnotes in the margins. The great theme had ended. The decline of the assassins was not sudden. It stretched across years of changing rulers and chains of decisions, none of which alone seemed fatal. Life in the fortresses continued by inertia. Watches, prayers, labor, training, rare missions. But once the network could no longer be sustained, everything began to resemble a monastic community, trapped between two embankments of a foreign world. Yet the core force that once made the order terrifying did not vanish, it changed form. Fear as a weapon lost its sharpness. A legend grew stronger. It moved from chronicles into folklore, from missionaries' words into travelers' tales, from jesters and merchants into European literature. There, in another cultural memory, the assassins lived a second life as a symbol. A shadow with a dagger, a trial for kings, a whispered password in dark corridors. The world in which the order was born and grew disappeared. New maps and new roads replaced it. But look at a black mountain ridge at night, at the rare lights in stone openings, and you may hear not sounds, but an echo of discipline that once held people together. There is no threat in that echo now, only rhythm, labor, secrecy, loyalty, silence. And perhaps this is the main reminder. Even a small community, if it knows how to speak to the world's imagination, can for a time change the pattern of great history. The story of the assassins did not end with the fall of Alamut. Stone walls can be destroyed, books burned, weapons rusted, but memory lasts longer than any building. It split into two lines, one quiet and real in the lives of Ismaili descendants, the other loud and mythical in the imagination of East and West. After the catastrophe of the mid-13th century, the Ismailis did not disappear. Many moved to other parts of Persia, to Syria, later to India and Central Asia. There they lived as religious communities, focused more on spiritual life than warfare. In new conditions, there was no place for daggers and secret killings. What remained were texts, rituals, oral tradition. Gradually, the center became not Alamut, but the figure of the Imam, a spiritual leader whose lineage traced back to Ali, the Prophet's son-in-law. That line survives to this day. Modern Ismailis number in the millions, from Pakistan to Canada. Their spiritual leader today is the Aga Khan, known not for warriors, but for philanthropy and cultural projects. He builds universities, supports museums, helps impoverished regions. It is a remarkable transformation from a sect that held the world in fear to a community known for education and culture. But there is another line, the legendary one. It is this line that made the assassins immortal. It was shaped by enemies of the order, Arab chroniclers, crusaders, European travelers. They told of hashish, gardens of pleasure, warriors leaping from towers at a single command. These stories were not always true, but they were too compelling to vanish. In Europe, the word assassin became synonymous with murderer. It entered languages, literature, legal texts. When people spoke of traitors or hired killers, they remembered the assassins. Even those who had never seen the East believed that somewhere beyond the mountains lived a dreadful sect ready to send its agents into the heart of any kingdom. In the Middle Ages, the word echoed in courts and chronicles. Later, in novels and plays. In modern times, scholars tried to separate myth from fact, but the legends of paradise gardens and drugs lived on. And in our own time, the assassins found new life in books, films, and games, becoming symbols of secret organizations that manipulate history and fate. And here lies a strange but telling truth. In reality, there were few assassins. Their killings were far fewer than legend suggests. But the myth built around them proved stronger than facts. That myth survived empires, wars, and centuries. Today, when we hear the word assassin, we do not think of a mountain fortress in Persia or theological disputes of Ismailism. We think of a dagger in the dark, of a shadow ready to strike at any moment, of fanatics smiling on the way to death. Thus, legend defeated history. But there is meaning in this victory. Even a small group, if it can command fear and imagination, can leave a mark on human memory. The long shadow of the assassins stretches across the centuries. It begins in Alamut, passes through European chronicles, through the pens of writers, through theater stages and game screens. And perhaps that shadow is the true legacy of the old man of the mountain. We have traveled a long road from early schisms in a young religion to grim mountain fortresses. From the asceticism of Hayyan ibn Sabah to the daggers of his Fiddins. From the terror of sultans and crusaders to myths that outlived centuries. The assassins were people of their time. They lived in a world of conflict, where faith killed and power constantly changed hands, where truth hid in secret books and sermons. They chose their method. A precise strike instead of an army, fanatical belief instead of gold, fear instead of fortress walls. But reality does not always match legend. Where there was discipline and asceticism, people saw hashish and paradise gardens. Where there was politics and calculation, they imagined sorcery and miracles. History and fiction fused so tightly that today they cannot be separated. And yet, it was the myth that made the assassins immortal. Their fortresses are gone, their books burned, their weapons rusted, but their name remains a symbol of shadow, fear, and hidden power that can change history. Perhaps this is the main lesson. People disappear, states collapse, but legends live longer than all. They become codes passed from era to era, from storyteller to listener. And in those legends, we seek not facts, but meaning. And now, my dear friends, It is time to let the story go. Close your eyes. Imagine the fortress lights fading into the night, shadows dissolving in the mountains, the whisper of legends drifting into the fog of time. Let knowledge give way to sleep. Good night.